Hi there, I'm Brian Lepire. I'm with Salem Film Fest, and I'm speaking today with Tomas Leach, the director of In No Great Hurry, 13 Conversations with Saul Leiter. Uh, Thomas, so can you tell me a little bit about your film and the premise of it and um, how you got involved with Saul Leiter himself, the subject of your film?
Well, I had a book of Saul's that it's called Early Color, and it was the first thing I had of his, and it was just a very beautiful book. So I thought, there's nothing about this guy out there. I should go and try and find him for an interview. So I started writing to his gallery, trying to find out more about him. I went to the archives. There was really very little out there about him, and so I started courting him slowly. I wrote him a letter. Sent him some old work, and he said that if I was in New York, he'd meet me for a coffee. So I flew to New York from London to meet him for coffee, and turned up at his doorstep, and he answered the door with just the words, "Why do people always want something from me?" Which made him intriguing and interesting, and I followed him in, and it was kind of, then he grilled me, he kind of interviewed me, and then we laughed quite a lot, and he eventually sort of agreed. He said, okay, it will happen, we will see, he wrote in my book. And then it took me another year to actually tie him down to start filming. So that was the kind of start of the whole process. And it just came from the love I have of his work.
So, Saul Leiter, the photographer, what was your first impressions when you met him? It seemed like a long process to actually get in the same room with him. So what was your first impressions of him as a person, as a character?
Well, Saul's incredibly charismatic. He's very funny. He's very curious about life. He's very interested in things. And he genuinely cares. He always has an opinion about things. He has a very unusual way of saying stuff. And I just, and still do, found him and find him endlessly fascinating. He's got stories about everything. He'll be 90 this year. He's lived in the Lower East Side since the 40s. He's been surrounded by artists but has been removed in a way and does his work just because he loves it. So that kind of human core that he has is just wonderful, I think.
Well, a lot of people have complimented the fact that your film gets across the charisma that Saul has. Can you talk a little bit about how long it took you to make this film, how long the process itself was, and if any difficulties that you encountered along the way, any bumps in the road?
Well, part of the process of getting him to agree was that he, when I started trying to look at raising finance, he was very put off by the idea that somebody else would have some kind of say over the film. So eventually we come to this agreement where I would just pay to make the film myself. I'd just do it alone. It would be me and him, and if either of us didn't like it at any point, we'd get rid of the whole lot. We'd just stop it. And it was this give and take of trust that allowed us to actually start. And then from there, it was just all the difficulties of making a film on your own, really. I mean, I usually shoot commercials or documentaries with crews, and it's just doing something on your own, simple things that you don't even think about. Getting a cab back after shooting with all the equipment, making sure that the batteries are charged, downloading all the footage, backing it up, getting interviews transcribed, then going back and shooting again, plus being on top of directing the story, are kind of a lot to think about all at the same time. And I don't, I'm not like, it was so hard. But it's also tough talking to an 80-something-year-old man for 4 or 5 hours at a stretch. It's a draining process, just in terms of, it's a long, in-depth, rambling conversation. So that kind of tires you out.
I can imagine with somebody like Saul as well, you could easily go different directions in the conversation.
Sure.
And
We went in circles constantly.
yeah, well, so you were saying it was difficult wearing many hats in this process. Can you talk a little bit about the editing process as well? Were you editing throughout, or were your main motives to get the footage along the way and then edit at the end, get all your materials together first, and then figure out what the story was there? Or
Well, the film I mean, the starting point of the film was I was just going to make something short, and it was just going to be a small interview piece. And then it became this whole different feeling, and I wanted everyone to feel like they'd spent time with Saul in the way that I was spending time with him. So I'd go to New York for a week or two at a time, shoot 4 or 5 days, come back to the UK, transcribe, get the material transcribed, and really work on it like I was editing a long-form piece of paper. You know, I'd draw my notes up, I'd scribble, I'd copy and paste. I've got this thick binder of all the notes I have during the process. And then I had 1 or 2 editors start working on it probably halfway through shooting. And they were just building scenes, working out what we have with different guidance with me. And so the life lessons kind of part of it took place midway through editing it to reflect the time I'd spent with him. Then I would go back the next trip knowing, okay, I really need to talk about this subject or close this off, or he said something here which is opening up another door, or I need to get a shot of the cat or his doorway or something, you know. So I'd be going back with all of this information from the last shoot in my mind next time I shot. And then once we'd finished actually shooting, it was probably another 6 months of finishing off.
Man.
On and off.
Well, it definitely sounds like a project of passion, a project of love. It seems very in depth in that ways, but it also seems like a great opportunity to see. It comes across in the film a great opportunity to see an artist at work. The capabilities behind that. Did you yourself pick up any lessons from Saul in regards to your own process of creating, as well as just the simple things in life?
Well, definitely more the simple things in life than the way of working. In the, you know, the work I do is always evolving depending on the project and how I'm feeling at the time and what shift it's going through. But I genuinely felt that he taught me things about being a human being that were incredibly insightful and still stay with me. And if I see the film now, they still trigger something in me, just because he has an incredible humility and without being bland, you know, which is fascinating for me.
He definitely seems like a character. Are you still in contact with Saul, or do you see him often?
Well, I was in New York before I came up here, and we spent three hours together on Wednesday, had lunch. I mean, in similar to filming, it didn't really matter whether I had the camera there or not in the end. I'd turn up with coffee in mid-morning, with coffee and maybe something to eat. We'd chat, drink coffee, I'd unpack equipment, film for a bit, then we'd go for lunch. Then we'd maybe talk afterwards or go and do something. It's exactly the same now without the camera. We're still talking, you know, we still chat. It's great. He's an important figure in my life now, and it's a privilege to hang out with him.
Well, now that you're bringing the film around places, what's audience reactions been? What's the feel you're getting? What's the pulse you're getting on the film itself, and how people are affected by your work and Saul?
I always I sit in for the first minute and a half, and if people have started laughing by that point, I know it's good. And so far, they're always laughing. It's I really wanted it. I think documentary can sometimes be really po-faced and kind of heavy-handed with its message, and I really wanted the film to be funny because he's funny, and I thought the process of making it was funny, so I wanted it to be a little bit silly and a little bit funny at times, and people seem to be laughing and enjoying it, and overwhelmingly positive so far. They love him. He's a great character. They love him.
Easy to like.
He's very easy to like.
Well, I guess my last question for you is, as somebody who's invested so much time into this process, who's invested so much of your own heart and effort, now that you're bringing it out there, what do you hope that your audiences, that the Salem Film Fest audience, that everyone else who sees this film can take away from it? What do you hope that gets across?
I don't mind I just hope people enjoy the time with Saul through the film. If they take away some of the things I took away from him and what they mean to me, it's going to be different from every person depending on what they do and how they do it. If they enjoy the hour and 15 minutes and they tell somebody else about it, or they check out his work, or they just chuckle, that's perfect for me.
Well, Tomas Leach, thank you so much for coming to Salem Film Fest. Thank you so much for sitting with me and talking.
It's a real pleasure.
So come to Salem, see the world.